neighbors who need a little bit of assistance. So if I can just share my screen. I believe I can do that, right? Whoops, I have to share my screen first, right?
Do that.
Yeah, I'll get it. Eventually I'll get this, promise. Okay, I guess you can see it now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I want to just do that. Okay, so the question is, what is a community land trust? I don't know how much people know, but I'll give you the basics and then a few details. Not too many, so we all fall asleep, but just enough, I hope. And please do jump in and ask any questions while I'm talking. That's fine with me. So a community land trust is what we call a shared equity trust, which basically means, in its simplest form, sharing wealth in housing. There are community land trusts across most of the country, and there are also quite a few in international locations. So why did we form a community land trust? Well, first of all, we observed that the city of Waterville had a large population of poverty. And there's huge disinvestment in not only rental homes, but also some home-owned homes across the city. And we felt that providing food and rental support is really important. And we're very glad that we do that, but we believe that building wealth is important, that we need to help people gain generational change generation poverty. Also, I'd had the benefit of being in Burlington, Vermont, and I saw the incredible success of the Champlain Housing Trust. And there's also a recognition that appreciation in real estate usually occurs not directly necessarily for something that a homeowner does, but by greater economic forces outside of their particular sphere. For example, national economic conditions can increase homes, social changes, improvements that the city may make in a neighborhood. All of those things will impact appreciation. And so how do we share appreciation? And that's what we began to look for. There are quite a few different types of equity organizations, but they all aim to build wealth for lower income families. And if you notice, the one feature that we share with limited equity co-ops, which I'd be glad to explain those more later, but is the permanent affordability. These are perpetually affordable homes. So for example, in homes that are built with tax credits, those sort of things, it's wonderful while it lasts, but eventually the bill comes due and we have to put in more money into those buildings. But with community land trusts and limited equity co-ops, these properties transfer each time, each sale at an affordable price. So we never need to put in additional subsidies into them. We deal in the low income limit, which is less than 80% of area median income. And I put up Bangor's median family income for 2021. And a four-family in Bangor, for example, can make up to $58,000 and still be within our limit of 80%. So we typically work within the 50, 60% to 80% area median income arena. There are about 15,000 home ownership units, which are permanently affordable again in community land trust, about 27,000 rental units. So community land trusts do both. And in fact, we do co-ops, condos, and apartments and commercial spaces for nonprofits and parks and gardens. There are 289 of us in the United States right now. And you can see the growth has been amazing. We started with only 162 in 2006. The average number of homes owned, about 100 units per community land trust, and the largest is Vermont with over 3,000 units. And that's across, I believe, 3 counties. Community Land Trust had excellent record during the great recession of 2008. We managed to have very few foreclosures and much lower delinquency rate than any of the market rate units in the country. What we basically do is that we make up the difference between a market rate and affordable price. So as years go by and the properties increase in value, this is the difference that we retain as a subsidy in the house. And the price, however, remains always affordable to the next buyer. In fact, the experience of Community Land Trust, because of the way that we price our resale houses, they tend to continue to be even more affordable than they were when they were first built. How do we work? Well, we we purchase property and then we acquire them in whatever geographic area we're working in. So for example, we're Waterville, but there are community land trusts in other cities or counties. It just depends on how you draw your geographic area. And when we purchase a house, we usually renovate it because we're currently Waterville Community Land Trust is renovating, not building new. And then a new resident buys our house. They own they own the value of the house, but they do not own the land. We retain the land in a land lease. They pay a small annual fee to support our operations and maintenance, which is about $25 a month, but we retain the land. And so then when it sells the next time, that process continues, but the next buyer is able to buy it at a much lower price. We are governed by a board, which is typically 1/3 of the residents who either live in our area or qualify on an income basis to live in one of our houses. We have other community residents who are interested in home ownership and rental affordable. And then we have experts and stakeholders who are part of our board. So our board has a good diversity to it, and we get a lot of backgrounds that are very helpful to us. We work to retain the historic fabric of the community. That's very often important to neighborhoods. And we also try to work within the poorest neighborhoods. And in Waterville, that is everything along the Kennebec River. It's a good chunk of the old city. And this has extremely high poverty rate. And also in a 2002 study, we found that it has very high number of substandard units throughout it. In fact, 65% of the residents in this target area, this purple area, are low to moderate income. We work to revitalize neighborhoods and increase pride of community spirit. So for example, we own a park, which we developed in the poorest neighborhood, and we tore down 3 dilapidated houses and built a park. We help support a community garden, and then we have events. Before COVID, we were able to have events for the community. So this is, basically, we provide perpetually affordable homes and we increase home ownership. That's our current objective. But again, we will eventually also work on rentals. This was our first house at 181 Water Street. We renovated it. And this is the house as we sold it. This is our current project. It's called the Milliken Project. We won the U.S. Conference of Mayors second place winners of small city category for this project, where we are attempting to revitalize one particular neighborhood, which was developed early on by the Milliken family, which actually they were also from Bangor. And we're focusing on this one area because we found that if we spread ourselves too thin, we're not going to have the desired impact on the neighborhood. What we really want to do is to improve this neighborhood so that other investors will come in, purchase the homes, and repair them and bring the neighborhood back to a condition where people are proud to live there. This was the second home, and it was in the neighborhood of the Milliken Project. And I would say that this house was about as close to a blighted slum that I've ever seen. And we worked about a year and a half. A lot of volunteer labor went into the house, as well as paid professional help in order to bring it back to good use. And we now have a purchase and sale agreement on this house. This was as it was when it was first built. And I wish we could have brought it back historically to exactly or closer to the same house. But unfortunately, as these things go, it was pretty well messed up by the time we purchased it. These were our goals as part of the U.S. Mayor's Conference, and I won't read them, but they were all important goals in order to revitalize the neighborhood and provide affordable home ownership in the neighborhood. And then this is a chart that just shows you in a rough way how we calculate a sales price of a house, so that if someone is buying a house that's worth $200,000, and we use an appraisal system to determine that. And then we have an outright down payment grant or a subsidy of $40,000, for example. And so the person buys the house for $160,000. These, by the way, are not Waterville prices. This is Champlain Housing Trust. We can't possibly get anything close to that right now in Waterville in our neighborhoods. But by the time you go through the process of calculating what will it sell for, it usually it will sell for only about $7,500 more than the person paid for it. And the reason is because we share 25% of the appreciated value that occurred for that home. And that appreciated value plus the equity built up in the home from making their monthly payments, they would take away from this sale $28,000. And here I've done a comparison of market rate and CLT ownership and rent. And you can see that if you owned this house outright, you would have had to put down $25,000, for example, down. You would have had the same mortgage as a CLT home, where you would have received a subsidy of $25,000. But at the end of the road, you will have made 60% of the price that you paid over what you paid, and a CLT home, you will have only made 38%. But if you rent, you will have made nothing. And so we have, of course, a process of how to apply for a community land trust house. Our main requirement is that you have to have $1,000 for closing costs, that you have to have no more than 80% of the area median income. You meet with us, you take the course that's offered by KVCAP for homeowners. And then we sign a purchase and sale agreement, and it's pretty much a normal process after that. I will say that one of our first problems was to find a bank that would lend to a community land trust. And that is something that almost all young community land trusts struggle with everywhere. But we do have a couple of banks now that will work with our buyers. So we are at least in the comfortable position of being able to recommend to people that they try a couple of banks. Here's a recent project that was announced by Kennebuck Heritage Housing Trust, which is a community land trust. And they are developing about a 19-unit project of affordable homes for the 80% or less area of their population for area median income. And they're using city-donated land, which is valued around $160,000. Main Housing, under a new program they have called the Affordable Subdivision Program, is providing $135,000, and they received an outright grant from the Federal Home Loan Bank of $75,000. The homeowners are paying about 71% of the cost of construction, so they're getting a 30% subsidy. And because they're using the Affordable Subdivision Program, the mortgage will be held by Main Housing First Home Loan Program, and also Bangor Savings Bank is involved with the mortgage as well. This just gives you an idea of the number of community land trusts. There are about 15 of us now in Maine. There are a couple of others that are discussing formation now. Between us, we own about 96 homes. There are 15 or so of them are rented, and we own about 487 acres of land in the state. Is another example of very successful project up on your island next to you there. The Island Housing Trust, you've probably heard of their recent announcement. They're going to build more homes on Jones Marsh. This is Covenant Community Land Trust, which isn't too far from you. And they were really the oldest community land trust, starting in 1978, and they own 26 homes and 200 acres of land. Greater Portland Community Land Trust has a project of 13 or more condos that they're building on city-owned land that's being granted to them in Portland. Maine Cooperative Development Partner is an equity co-op developer, and again, it's part of the equity family of land trust, and that's also in Portland. Raise Up, you may have heard of them. This is another co-op trust, and they're in Lewiston. They own 2 buildings with co-ops, and they're hoping to get another 1 or 2 very soon. Land in Common is more of a farm type. They own 5 homes, but they mainly also focus on preserving land for growing food. The Island Workforce Housing is just announced that they have reached their pledge, and they'll be building a new subdivision. The Monhegan Island Sustainable Community Association is another community land trust that's working on a new project. So what are the potential funding sources for workforce home ownership and also affordable rentals? And I've laid them out here. Community development block grants, of course, you already know about that. I think that your community receives them on an annual basis. Of course, there's ARPA money from the pandemic money that's potentially available through the county or through the city. There is the Community Solutions Grant and the subdivision program under Maine Housing Authority, although those are limited right now to how all of our community trusts can use them. And so we're actually meeting with the governor's office next week to talk about how those could be more flexible so that all community land trusts could use those programs. And of course, there's also gifts of land or buildings from the city or individuals. We're also looking at a home consortium, and that would bring in money on an annual basis to an area consortium that would take the place of, say, applying to the state of Maine Housing Authority for home funds to do your projects. You'd be able to have a more local source. And we are looking at including and talking to many cities in the area, including Augusta, Waterville, Skowhegan, Madison, Bangor. We're going to be looking for partners fairly soon. There's also housing TIF money, which you're probably fully aware of. And then these other sources down below, which could be used depending on your situation. Pending Maine legislation that could be used to revitalize neighborhoods is the Maine Land Bank legislation, which was just up for a vote this week. It went back to be studied, but relatively hopeful that that will pass and be very helpful to all of us who are working to revitalize our cities and build affordable homes. A couple of things that might be worth researching to increase home ownership, is if that's your focus, would be preservation purchase laws, which allow for organizations like our nonprofits to purchase homes that perhaps are on the market that landlords are planning on selling. They give notification to their tenants, and their tenants then contact the community land trust or other nonprofit and asked if we could purchase it. Those things are problematic right now for some legal reasons, but there are a few of them around. Then there's owner-occupied residential incentive programs that also could be worth looking at. And one excellent resource that I want to leave with you is a report from Indiana, which I think lays out very well all of the issues that we all deal with in our older cities. And so there you go. Do you have any questions?
you, Nancy. That was awesome. It's a lot of information to process. So if anybody has any questions, you can just raise your hands and I'll click on you to unmute you. So. I guess I'll start off. My original question was going to be, what can cities do to help facilitate this kind of work? And I noticed you talked about land donations and things like that. What other kinds of recommendations do you have for cities to do that?
Well, I think first thing, they need to have a plan on what is their main focus area. And I would say focusing on a specific area of the city can be very helpful, but you can put together various programs to help your residents fix up their properties. You could certainly do incentive grants or incentive loans, zero or no interest loans. You could establish a land bank. You can do that locally now, even with the state legislation. And a land bank would be a good source where money can be funneled in and out of. And if you have loans, money can go back to that. Certainly helping a city right now under Maine's Community Solution Act, land trust does need to have a gift of land or building or cash from a city in order to have that matched by Maine Housing. And that is good if you happen to have a lot of properties under tax title that you've taken. I'd be curious to know if you do. Waterville doesn't happen to have many very often. I think it's probably good that the treasurer tries to work with people, who are going to potentially lose their home. But in other cities, like bigger cities than larger cities in Waterville, there are quite a few pieces of property they own. For example, Portland seems to have quite a few empty parcels that they are able to offer to these nonprofits. So there's also the subdivision program. So if you're building 5 or new affordable homes, you can get help from Maine Housing on that. But not everyone wants to build new homes. We have old cities, and there are a lot of houses that need work, and they're actually pretty good bones, but they need a lot of renovation. So, and they're also very densely packed, and that's one of the priorities of the state right now is to build properties that are the zoning changes so that they're closer together, and we already have that in, for example, Waterville. We have tons of houses that right on top of each other, but they're in terrible condition. And people either don't want to move into those neighborhoods. And so what we get are a lot of rental properties that a good chunk of disinvestment happens in those properties. So we need to turn that around. There are all sorts of ways.
Let's see. Another thing I was wondering, I noticed that a lot of the projects seem to focus on single family housing. Have there been projects out there that have done multifamily housing homeownership scheme?
You mean like condos, for example,
yeah.
Or co-ops, yeah. Which is another form of ownership? Oh, sure. I mean, most community land trusts deal with the full gamut of not only just home ownership, but also rental. Right now, if we could find a house that has been converted into rentals, we would probably do a mixture. We might condos some of them, or we may retain them as rentals and renovate them. But there are most of the old houses in Waterville have been added onto over the years and have been converted from what once were single family homes to multiple units. Some of them chopped up maybe too much, too many apartments in one house, not enough parking, the plumbing is suspicious, electrical doesn't exist. So we would probably decrease the number of units in those sort of properties. But the idea is to make a house that's livable for whoever is going to be living there. Yeah, so we're very interested in condos. We'd like to do condos, yeah.
Okay, we've got a few questions. Randy Hatch, I'll let you go first.
Nancy, how did you have the two that you acquired? What was the situation that you got those two homes?
Well, the first house we purchased from someone who was going into a nursing home.
Okay.
And her family needed to sell it. And so we acquired that, and we received a gift in order to purchase that house. And then we renovated it and resold it. The second house, we used the proceeds from the first house and some other money that we've gotten from foundations in order to renovate it. And now we're ready to sell that one.
So were you looking in certain neighborhoods? Was it a word of mouth? I was just curious how you actually got to save those two.
Yeah, these two houses. These two houses are both in the same neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And our intention was, when I say it was maybe a crazy thing to do, but our intention was to buy in the poorest neighborhood in Waterville.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And it also, of course, means that when we sell it, we have difficulties finding people who are willing to live in those neighborhoods.
Right.
We also have troubles finding people who not only are willing to live there, but are also willing to own a home there, because they're risking something themselves, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we've got the Milliken Project, which focuses on that one neighborhood. It's just 3 or 4 streets.
Yeah.
And if we focus on that neighborhood, we're already finding that it's made a difference in the neighborhood. We've already had a couple of houses purchased and renovated. One of them has been bought by a family. The other has not been sold yet. So we know that, for example, around our park, where we tore down a couple of really houses that were in terrible shape, it was a real eyesore in the neighborhood. It was painful to look at it. We tore them down. It was a nice piece of almost 2 acres on the Kennebec River. We made a park out of that. And right away, you could see people improving their homes. You know, it wasn't, I don't mean to say that you suddenly saw new perfect exteriors or anything like that, but you began to see new plantings. You began to see paint. You began to see, just new additions to the house on the outside that made it more attractive. So people respond to an improving neighborhood. I mean, we know that they respond to the opposite. We know that it only takes one house to impact everyone else around it.
Right.
So the opposite seems to be also true. It's just going to be slower, because this area, I don't know about Bangor, but this particular area in Waterville has a long-standing reputation for being the neighborhood with the most crime, with the most with houses with the most trouble. Yeah. And it isn't necessarily true. If you look at the statistics, there are other neighborhoods in Waterville that are frankly not as good. It's just that the reputation of that particular neighborhood really sticks.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Larry Danzinger has a question next. I'll let him talk.
Hi, I'm Larry Danzinger. I live in the Old Capehart area right now. But before that, I lived for 23 years on the Community Land Trust in Monroe. That's not on Nancy's list, but does exist and has existed since the early 1980s. So, and I had generally a very good experience on that Community Land Trust. But what I'm thinking, now that I'm in Bangor, I'm thinking about what can Bangor do. And in my mind, the first thing that Bangor needs to do is to develop an organized group that's willing to promote affordable housing, that believes in affordable housing. And I think the city can at least initially provide some financial support in a couple of ways. One, by paying somebody other who's not a city employee to help get something organized in this area. And I'm not looking for a job, so I'm sure there are other people that are, that have a lot of commitment to affordable housing. There are a number of approaches. You didn't talk about resident-owned mobile home parks, but Cooperative Development Institute in New England, I think has an organizer somewhere in Maine who's focusing on that. So the city can, for example, can contact owners of mobile home parks and say to those people, if you're thinking of selling this park, we think the residents in the park may want to buy it. Please give them first refusal. Please suggest, encourage that as a first option for selling that park if they're interested in doing that. And there's a few of those in my area as well. So I don't know if any of them are for sale, but that would be a good approach. Another, which Nancy mentioned a little bit, was looking for abandoned houses. And I don't know how many there are in Bangor. Do you have any sense of the number there? Any ideas? Somebody said at one point they thought there were 150, but that seems like quite a few, but maybe it's not that many. And maybe, anyways, they're just sitting there right now. I don't know how many of them have the potential to be fixed up by the owners, but if the city should be putting some pressure on at least some of those owners. For example, right behind me, there was a house that sat for about 4 years that I know at least part of the time was owned by Wells Fargo Bank. Nobody can tell me Wells Fargo Bank does not have enough money to fix that house up. They let it sit for quite a while, and eventually somebody's in there now. I don't even know if the bank did anything or if it just sold it as is to somebody else eventually, but the bank certainly could have fixed that house up. And I suspect at least some of the houses, including the one that just had a fire a few weeks ago. I don't know exactly who owns it, but I think it was some entity, maybe some company in Texas, and there should have been a lot more pressure on those folks to fix that house up sooner. And if not, the city should have taken it. The city should put a lot more pressure on so that you don't have those houses just sitting there. And if you have an organized group, that group can then work on financing to get that house bought and hopefully fixed up. There's some other resources that I think, there's right now, I'm working with a group trying to get the county and the city to use some of the American Rescue Plan Act money for things like affordable housing. And I don't know what the city has in mind for that, but it's getting $20 million. And it would be nice if at least a little, if not a few millions of that were committed to affordable housing in various ways, whether it's a revolving loan fund, whether it's, again, paying somebody or somebody's to organize an affordable housing group that could create a community land trust, do some of the things Nancy's talking about, do some of the, I'm very impressed with the work being done with FairOp in Lewiston. They're doing some great work there as well. There's also, I believe, somebody through a Cooperative Development Institute working on cooperative housing in the state of Maine, and that person should be brought into the process as well, if that person exists. And I do know that the Greater Bangor Housing Coalition, mostly people who are living on the streets or maybe in the shelters, some of those folks certainly have incentive and an interest and awareness about the need for affordable housing. That's a good source of individuals that could be involved in a community land trust or in a affordable housing development organization in the Bangor area. And again, I think the city can help. It shouldn't be involved directly, but I think it should be willing to help to initiate and support something, a group like that can do that kind of work, because I think the Waterville Community Land Trust there, I don't know the history of how that got started, Nancy, but maybe you could tell us about that. But it's probably, and I know one or two people that are working on the one in Portland at least several years ago. And it's basically people willing to give the time because they believe in affordable housing and the need for that.
Thank you, Larry. I had to take notes to make sure I remembered everything that you said. I can get you in contact with people who are working on co-ops legislation.
Well, I know who those folks are, but
you do? Okay. Okay.
You know, get the city, some city folks, and some people that are interested in creating an affordable housing group in the area. That they would be especially interested in that also.
Oh, I think so. I think co-ops are well, community land trusts also have co-ops. So we're very interested in that. And we are working together. As I said, we're going to the governor's office next week to talk about how some of the current programs can hopefully, be adjusted so that community land trusts can take advantage of them as well. You mentioned, let's see, ARPA money. You probably saw the announcement that the federal government has now said that ARPA money can be used for housing. So the county money and city money, if they're interested, could be allocated for affordable housing. I just wanted you to know that you mentioned the number of vacant or abandoned buildings in Bangor. It seemed like a lot that you mentioned, but in just a little
figure.
I just want you to know that just in the small area that we're looking in, we're working in right now in Waterville, there are 21 vacant houses. So I wouldn't be surprised if you had well more than over 100 vacant houses. And the trailer park, we have quite a few trailer parks in Waterville. We just got another one approved by the planning board last or 2 years ago for something like 65 units. And it's been fascinating to watch because right now there are like 4 or 5 trailers for sale in that new trailer park, and they're going for $120,000 and more each. Our second house, our first house sold for, I think it was $50,000, and our current house is selling for $97,000. So those trailers are going over more than our affordable home. The problem I personally have with trailers is, when I lived in Vermont, the governor of Vermont said his dream was to give everyone who has a trailer a real home that would appreciate in value instead of depreciate in value, as trailers usually do. But you mentioned that people who live in trailer parks should have the opportunity, if they can, to purchase the land underneath their trailers, and I absolutely agree with that. Both CEI and Genesis help trailer communities do that. So I would help any trailer community that wants to purchase their own land. But I have to say that a small trailer park in our poorest neighborhood in Waterville, I think it's maybe 11 acres of land, just sold to a speculator for $1 million. Pretty outrageous, truly amazing. I have no idea what they have in mind. So there's going to be a lot, as you know, there's just a tremendous push by outside investors to buy what looks like good deals all over the country. And we're beginning to see those investors here in Waterville. You also mentioned something where I took a note about a land bank. I think that a land bank is maybe your best bet to consolidate the housing plan for housing in a city. because it has so much more flexibility. And you mentioned the fact that there was a house for sale. The bank owned it. They didn't put it on the market. That helps. That happens everywhere. So both banks do that, but also individual owners will purchase a house and they'll rent it. Maybe they'll rent it, maybe they won't, but eventually it can sit there empty and just degrade and hurt the neighborhood around it. And it's very difficult for the city to do much about that until they declare it a dangerous building. And that's a long process, but a land bank could be very helpful with the type of legislation that's now being proposed in the state. So I encourage you to take a look at that legislation that's now in the Senate.
And just a quick response. As far as the ARPA funding, the city is coming up with a process now to get public comment soon on that. I know within the next month or so, they'll be discussing that. There's the vacant buildings. I don't know the exact figure, but I think the code office officially, there's maybe around 150 placarded buildings. And I will say that the city is doing everything we can. And we are putting pressure on people, but like Nancy pointed out, our hands are tied in some cases. So yeah. Oh, Anne Marie here has a question as well. So I'm just gonna let her talk now.
So my concern is with the historic buildings in Bangor, we have so many beautiful houses here, and a lot of them are falling into deterioration. And I think in a number of cases, people really want to do something to fix up their houses. It's just so expensive. And is there a solution to that? Is there anything going on anywhere in the United States that's addressing that? I mean, we have the richest architectural legacy in our city. And it's so sad seeing these buildings crumble.
So I can
no idea how to do it. I'm just putting forward my concerns.
So I can, and Anne might be able to help me out on this, but I can speak to a little bit of what the city helps with. In our Community and Economic Development Office, we do help grant funding, which does help with rehab loans for people that is income restricted. And then, Anne, I believe there is also help for historical properties in the historic district. Is that right?
There are some programs that Maine Preservation runs. Yeah, there's a few grant programs. But for the private homeowner, there are not as many, except for the rehab that Anya was talking about. That rehab program is a great program.
So what are the terms of it? I'm curious.
Yeah.
It is income restricted. So it's for low to mod income in Bangor. And it is a low cost loan.
Well, Anne Marie, I'm very sympathetic. I own a house that's actually in the National Register of Historic Places. And I know firsthand how expensive it is to maintain a home, and particularly an antique house. All I can say is that my solution has always been to try to maintain it myself. And when I can't, I'll have to move. That's, but it really worries me what will happen to these houses. And so many of the beautiful houses in Waterville have been cut up into apartments. Vinyl siding, I know a lot of people love it, but boy, it really hurts antique houses.
Yeah, it really does. I too lived in a house on the National Historic Register, and it was falling into, deterioration. And so it took 8 years to restore the house, but I did it as I could afford to do it, like the ceilings, and maybe the next year the floors, and then the next year something else. So But I mean, it takes such a dedication to do that. And then after that's all done and this house is sold, there's no guarantee at all that the next people who buy it are going to take care of it. Even after you've restored it inside and outside, there is, to see a house that's been restored start to fall into, you know, disrepair, or it's very hard. But you answered my question, Anya, I think, as far as the low, low interest rates for people who are income, they're eligible because of
Correct.
the particular category they come under.
Correct.
I don't know if anybody who even knows about that. I mean, how do I get the word out?
We do try to do some outreach, but yeah, we can talk to our outreach coordinator about, you know, pushing that out again to people to let them know that that's available.
That would be great. Thank you.
So Nancy's, as we try to look at, you know, these topics that we're doing in this lecture series, we're trying to say, you know, how is this something that Bangor should look to, you know, as we prepare our comprehensive plan. Can you talk a little bit more about the connection you have with the city, you know, and sort of how that works?
First of all, I want to say how happy I am to see that Bangor is interested in looking at alternative ways of providing affordable homes. I think it's very important to have a relationship with the city, and you may already know that there have been quite a few community land trusts that were started by cities. Chicago was, Detroit probably was. A lot of other states have been involved with starting their community land trust. And I have to say that Waterville was not involved with our beginning, but we're beginning to work more together. The best example is that we would hope to ask the city to allow us to be gifted a piece of property that they might take for taxes, for example. And we could then return that to good use. But to me, there's really no substitute for a close relationship between the city, because after all, you probably feel that you have a direct interest in the condition of the properties in the community. You know, your tax base depends on good property values in the community. Your reason to bring in other businesses can depend on the quality of the neighborhoods. I mean, people want to start a business in the community, but they'd like to know that there's a place for people to live. In Waterville, we've historically lost people. We have people coming in to work here, but they all leave. And I don't mean all, but you know what I'm saying. A lot of people don't live here. And so when we have new companies that look at Waterville and say, well, we want to start a business there, typically their employees don't live here. So that's a serious problem. And so that's another good reason why a city should have a direct interest in housing and help support it. So back in the days of Bernie Sanders in Vermont, he was the one who started that community land trust when he was mayor of Burlington.
Oh, wow.
He gave he started the community land trust. He gave them, I believe, it was $250,000. And this was back in the, what was it? The early 80s. He gave them $250,000. He had his planning staff. Some of them went over to work in the community land trust so that it would have a good base of employees to help. And now they own over 3,000 properties in 3 counties, and have been the reason why the city, in many reasons, to a great extent, a reason why the city has really turned over and is now a very prosperous city. So every good reason in the world why a city should do more than just lip service to a community land trust, but actually help support it, get it going. We've done only 2 houses in 6 years. That's not enough. You know, we could have done so much more if we had even access to, say, zero interest loans, right? But, and that's something that I'm hoping, I'm now on the housing committee in Waterville. I'm hoping that that will happen. Habitat for Humanity in this area has only done one house every 3 years. And they could have done a lot more if they had some help. There are good reasons why taxpayers should be interested in seeing that type of support, because it's their neighborhoods, right? So I'm very impressed that you're interested and looking into starting a community land trust. And of course, one other thing to add is that by your support, the community land trust will have much easier time, say, of finding a bank that will give mortgages for their home buyers. Because banks want to know, you know, does this community land trust have a reason that it's going to stay around, or is it going to dissolve in a matter of a couple of years? And then we're going to be stuck with this community land trust house without the community land trust, right? So, yeah, lots of good reasons why I hope you start a community land trust.
So I think we're about out of time here. I just wanted to check, Randy, you still had your hands up. Did you have another question or? Okay, so I'm just going to go over a few things for the comprehensive plan. Like I said, this series is part of our comprehensive plan public engagement process. And so I'm just going to give a quick tutorial on some of the ways people can engage with that. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. So this is our main page. If anybody wants email updates on the comprehensive plan, you can just go down here to get email updates. You can just click comprehensive plan updates, put your email address in, do join. We'll be sending out email updates every week for the lecture series. And then however often we need to after that. This process will be going on for the next year or so. And then also we do have a new public engagement website. So if you go up to our departmental webpage, you can either go to planning or you can go to community and economic development. But if you just go there and then you click on comprehensive plan 2022, the vision board, we have an interactive map. We also have some forums here for some more extensive discussion. These two are pretty similar, but the interactive map provides people the ability to pinpoint specific areas to talk about. And we do have some guiding questions here that might help. And this is all the old feedback from our economic development strategy. So we just really want people to kind of build on that and just maybe talk about some of these questions. And the vision board, if you want to do that, one of these and then put your comments in. Let me just show you too how the map works. But you just drag it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Anne Marie, did you have one more question?
Yeah, just one quick question.
Okay.
Should we be working with an office in City Hall that's trying to attract industry to Bangor? Because the two really are inseparable. In order to have people come here who want to live and produce and so on, we've got to have companies that they can work for. And so I've been noticing that in Canada, there are some companies opening up that would normally be, that are doing things that would normally be done in China, like clothing, really beautiful clothing from Canada. And we need, I think, in Maine to start doing some manufacturing. And if we could get some manufacturing businesses in or near the city, then we would attract people to do the houses for and who would be interested. I don't know, I think we have to join the two things, the housing and trying to attract companies who will employ the people who will be living in them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we just completed an economic development strategy that's also on the city's webpage, the current draft. And there it talks about that sort of that synergy, if you will, between having adequate housing to house employees and having a place for them to work and having it all fit together as one. And I think as we go through the comprehensive plan process and we look at more of the data and have a better understanding of the city as a whole, I think we're going to refine that in a vision. But yeah, exactly what you're saying is what we're trying to accomplish in planning and development.
Thanks, Ann.
I'd like to just add to that for too many years, I had people say to me, well, we can't possibly improve our neighborhoods until we get good jobs here. But you can do a lot for your neighborhoods.
Well, they work hand in hand, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, what I'm saying is that there were people who just felt that we had to wait for, a white knight to arrive. That we couldn't really talk about improving neighborhoods until we had a new business, and typically they were looking for some large engineering firm or something to come in. What I'm trying to say is you can do a lot to help your neighborhoods without having new businesses, but you're not going to get new businesses that want to move in unless you have nice neighborhoods, which is what you're saying, Anne Marie.
Yeah. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Nancy, for this.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah. I wish you well. And please, ask me anything. I'd be glad to answer anything I can.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you everyone else for participating tonight. So.
Bye.
Bye-bye.